What's up, everybody? It is a new day today, and it's a big day for me. Finally, after waiting 11 months for a 4-speed transmission from Brewer's Performance, I finally got it, and I'm pretty sure I have all the parts to make this one assembly. So this 508 big block stroker is going to become one with that date code correct 1969 A833. So it's an 18 spline, so it's considered a Hemi 4-speed. Technically, I'm not sure why they called it a Hemi 4-speed, other than the 18th spline is supposed to be superior to the multiple more, or the more, I'm not sure what the other spline count is. I think it's like 30, 32, something like that. But forgive me, Mopar guys, I'm not up on everything. But I went with this guy because it is the strongest one that Chrysler ever made, and I felt it would be a really good package for this car. Kind of keeping it OEM and a little bit sentimental, I guess you could say. It's not an original 4-speed car. I have converted it for those who are new to the channel. I didn't get a discount on the 4-speed from Brewers. I waited, again, 11 months. I was promised 9, so that kind of sucked, but I guess, you know, it is what it is. It just kind of goes along with everything else that's back ordered and taking forever, but good things come to those who wait, hopefully, in my case. But I'm going to make that engine and the transmission sit on this guy that I have partially assembled, and I'm going to do it the old school way by picking the front of the car up and then sliding engine and transmission on that crate. I'm going to kind of have the engine supported by this one. Don't worry, it's 1,000-pound capacity, straight out of Hobo Freight. I thought about just buying casters and putting a pallet together, but I bought these for like less than $30 each, so it seemed like a better use of my time to just purchase it. And this beauty right here is going to be hopefully one with this guy by the end of the day. First things first, I got to pull the carburetor off and get my hoist set up and get the pressure off this engine stand so I can pop that flywheel on. Once I have the flywheel on, I'm going to put the bell housing on, and we're going to measure for run out inside the bell housing opening. I'll show you what I'm talking about, but it's a common practice for mounting a 4-speed on an engine due to the way the clutch works in and out like that. If you don't have it totally square with the alignment tool and this guy here is a dial indicator. So you put this magnet together with this gauge here, and you mount it inside on one of the crank bolts, and then you rotate the crank from the front side of the engine, and as it goes around, it checks the run out, I guess, from the crank spinning, and the bell housing is obviously fixed, so there's always a chance you might need offset dowels. Like these guys are just the straight ones. There's no offset in them, those are factory, but depending on the run out that I get from this test and measure, hopefully these guys can work. I really don't want to remove these. I'm sure they're probably easier than being in there since this engine was new, but hopefully the machine shop actually removed them and put them back, so if I do have to remove them, they won't be so hard. So alright, let me get this carb off and put some tape over it so nothing falls in, and let's get this going. This is an 850 CFM Screamin' Demon carburetor. Obviously could have gone with a much bigger carburetor, but for drivability around town, these have much better modulation of the throttle than say a 1050 or a 1200 or whatever, something bigger. Those are more like an on-off switch for like drag racing and competition use, mud racing and whatnot, where those guys literally live at wide open throttle. This is going to be driven around town, and the bigger the carburetor, the more like an on-off switch the throttle is, so you have to keep that in mind. Ask any good engine builder, he'll verify that. may seem a bit redundant, but just if I have to have this carburetor off for any amount of extended amount of time, I'll feel better knowing that there's no dust going into this thing. Or parts, washers, hardware, etc. Just cheap insurance. I am so excited to do this though. I can't even tell you. I'm sure you guys are really dying to see a drivetrain in this car, as am I. But gotta have one step at a time. Okay, let me get my hoist chain. So it may seem redundant, and maybe it is, but this is just the way I do things. In the name of like getting this thrown back together quick after it's all assembled and not having to deal with it, I always mark the spark plugs in the order of where they go. Just makes things easier. And there are two things. So you got 1357, 1357 and 2468. Easy enough, right? If you can't remember that, you can always go buy one of David Freiberger's shirts that have the firing order on the front of them in case you forget. I actually would like to buy one myself, but I always spend my money on car stuff, and clothing is always last on my purchase list. It's car guy stuff, as you guys probably can relate. But alright, so let's get these plug wires off. Okay, this is not rocket science, but just how I do things. I do not like these spark plug wires. It's not really that big of a deal, but I have specific things that I like, just like in women. You know, we all have a type, right? Well, these aren't my type. I don't like these, but that's enough of that. Doesn't mean they won't work for a little while. And on a Chrysler, it's a 50-50 shot. The oil pump drive is at the end of the distributor here, and so I always mark where my distributor base is. I've marked it with a black Sharpie, so it's kind of hard to see on the black. So I mark the distributor where it's at, and then I mark the rotor where it's at as well, because obviously that can change. But in a Chrysler, it's like a flathead screwdriver slot, and I'll show you in a sec here. But you can see how I have the rotor position marked. So, and you'll see why it's a 50-50 shot here in a sec. So you can see the distributor gear on the bottom of a distributor, but Chrysler's, you can see it's just like a flathead screwdriver, which actually makes a priming tool pretty easy to make. You know, backyard mechanic style. You don't need to buy one, in other words. You can just get an old flathead screwdriver, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut it off, and I'll have a priming tool for free. So, got over here, and obviously that flathead goes into here, which is the intermediate shaft, and there's the distributor gear is on that, is down there and there in the shaft there, so it's driven off the cam. Obviously, you can kind of see the cam down in there. That is a big cam to my standards. I'm really excited to see that thing move or hear it make noise. So, alright, so I think I'm ready to get this baby up in the air and put a flywheel on. I've got my bolts here. Always have a washer just for that added security. Got one here. Unfortunately, these heads don't have a lot of provisions. I was kind of bummed about that. You can see, like, the stock heads would have, I think they have at least 4, but these only have them on one end. So, like, my alternator side will probably be okay, but I don't know what I have to deal with the power steering side. That's going to be interesting. So hopefully I can figure it out. But I guess aluminum head problems. What are we going to do? So let me get this thing hoisted up here, and all right. have these cheesy Home Depot straps that I do not recommend. I was in a pinch, my truck was in the shop, my trailer was in Arizona, and so to get out to the sand dunes, I had to rent a trailer. I had a rental car at the time, and so I had to buy some straps. And yeah, so that's why I have these. They're a 1,000-pound rating, which I guess isn't bad, but I just don't like them. They're just cheap. So when I'm doing this, I'm going to try to, the key is keeping these straps secure, obviously. But when you're using a ratchet strap, you have to wind it up slightly so it doesn't slip. Again, it's kind of a duh moment, but it's a real struggle, let me tell you. I think that should do it. But I would highly recommend having a friend help you with this. Don't do this. This is dumb. Good time to make sure that all your block plugs that are going to be hidden behind the flywheel are going to be, you want to make sure that they're sealed up and tight. Otherwise you're going to have to pull the flywheel off to do that, and that's never fun because they always fit tight. Yeah, this is when that buddy would come in handy. Take these carb studs out, so then I'll wipe them off with my tie strap here. Just put a little tension on it just to keep the strap from coming off. You can see my rig here. It's definitely not the safest, but it's definitely not the most dangerous either. I don't like to use chains really, unless I have to, because the chains always booger up the corner of the heads, especially with aluminum heads. And they're pretty sharp too. I mean, I suppose they could cut also, but you want to make sure your bolts are seated and not just hand tight. This is a do it as I say, not as I do kind of a moment, so. But yeah, that should be fine, right? That should totally be fine. Famous last words. Holding. I like this thing out. Oh, that's kind of cool. I guess if you use a strap, you can actually spin the motor. me get a ratchet to pull my engine plate off. Now I have excellent access to the crank. So I'm going to show you guys this. Try not to die. See the like in an LS, these bolts go into the galley, but you can see obviously these guys don't. So instead of like a thread sealant, you just use Loctite on these, because you can see this main cap. Well, it's not really a main cap, it's actually just a seal housing, I guess you could say. But you can see what I mean about the oil galley plugs. These guys are loose, they're gonna leak, and you'll have to pull the whole thing apart. So that's gonna be a bad time. You won't like it. So now's the time to make sure this stuff's tightened up. So grab my flywheel and see if it goes on. So your flywheel is obviously one-sided, and you can see this crosshatch pattern that they put. It's basically a scuffed surface, so the clutch pads can actually get some traction on this. There's always a protective layer of oil on this stuff to keep it from rusting. So do not put your clutch on there without hitting this with some brake clean or contact cleaner, lacquer thinner, anything that'll clean this surface like antiseptically. You have to get it clean, otherwise it's like a brake rotor basically. You don't want to have any oil in there. At the very least, hit it with some torch heat. It'll actually burn all the contaminants off. So just a tech tip there. Now these holes aren't exactly symmetrical. In other words, they only go on one way. Let's spin it. Let me show you guys. So, as you can see, I'll try to do this without dropping it on the ground. You can see how the holes don't line up. Oh, we're getting 1, 2, 3. There's that, and all of a sudden they all line up. So they did this, I believe, for balancing. The crank is internally balanced, but I believe there were select engines that were externally balanced, which would mean there's a weight on the flywheel. And it's also the reason why they do this in I guess hub centric. So you have to have it in one position and one position only. And if it was all the same layout between these holes, I could see how anybody can get that wrong and put the weight at a different clocked position, which wouldn't be effective obviously. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm gonna go grab my hardware and thread locker. So this transmission kit came with ARP hardware for everything. And it's also marked, which is really cool. So there's really no thought process needed for it. You really just grab the right ones. It's pretty straightforward. So I'm gonna get these guys out of the package and I'll load them up with thread sealer. And I gotta get my torque wrench. So I decided to, I guess, take a side step here and install this pilot bushing. So this actually goes in, it's a press fit into the back of the crank, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen this before. Sometimes they're actual like roller bearings in these, and sometimes they're just a consumable material like this one. It feels like brass. It's not copper, I doubt it's copper, but it's brass. So what I've done is I've matched this up with the closest socket size. So I'm using a deep socket to drive this thing in. You guys may not know, but there's actually a really cool removal process for these if you ever need to replace them. You can use bar soap, grease, bread, whatever, and you really just jam, like when this is installed and you're trying to get it out, you can jam any of those things into the hole and then find a really tight fitting I guess projectile to actually it hydraulically presses this out, but that projectile actually has to fit inside the diameter of this bushing or bearing that you're removing. Long story, hopefully I don't have to show that. That sounds like a pain in the ass, but when you're in the middle of nowhere and you have to do it, you know, usually you have some bread or hamburger bun or whatever to do it. So it's actually, I've seen it done, it's actually really cool, but I don't have to do that today, thank God. I'm just gonna put a little bit of anti-seize on this, keep it from seizing in there, and then I'm gonna install it. And all this is just Permatex brand anti-seize. Just keeps the materials from fusing together over time with heat cycles and stuff like that. Just trying to help out future Chris. At some point this will need to be replaced. Now you don't want to use a lot of this stuff, just enough. We'll wipe off the ends. It really just needs a light coat of this stuff. You don't need to go crazy, because if it melts and comes off, it could get on your clutch, and that's bad news. So go easy on it. Just a light coat is all you need. And in this case, I'm going to use this side of the socket to drive it in, because if I use this side, I'm limited, and if I screw up, I could booger up the bearing or bushing. Get it started here. Just cleaned out. I am using the hammer just to get it in as far as I can, but as soon as I hit this flange, it really isn't going anywhere anymore. When it's going in, it'll feel like it's moving, but once it seats all the way, it'll have a different sound to it, and that's when you know it's seated. You'll feel it in the hammer. Almost flush with the crank register. Got that in. Alright. Get my flywheel. I should probably mention that you really shouldn't touch the friction surface on these guys. I mean, I guess if you have to, it's probably not that big of a deal, but the steel or the material it's made out of has pores, and if you get oil from your hands on it, it may actually stay. So just be aware of that. I'm just touching the teeth here, getting it locked correctly. And again, there's only one way this goes on. Of course, I'm always 180 out. I'm going to put a safety just in case something weird happens while I'm doing this. So that'll keep it from falling off. But the ARP hardware is it's best as far as I'm concerned. I'm sure there's better stuff, but they are everywhere, and their stuff is really good. And they do come with like a little bit of a film on the threads, and it's ideal to actually remove the thread film before you put Loctite on it. And then I gotta look up a torque spec. I think it's like 50, but I want to be sure. I've got the Dodge Charger Coronet Dart 1969 service manual here, which I bought off Amazon, or my wife got me on Amazon for like 60 bucks. It has proven its worth time and time again, especially going to be like assembling the shifting linkage and all that stuff that, unless you're a Dodge Mopar nut working on this stuff for a long time, I couldn't tell you how to adjust all that linkage, so we're going to do it together. But I'm just cleaning up the hardware here just to make sure everything's good. Replace this guy. It's already in there. For a clean one. Now, the reason why this is so important is because if this thing comes off, it will be like a giant buzz saw through your car, literally through the floorboard, through the floor pan. And so these bolts come off, that's big trouble. So just take the time to do it right. Promise it'll be worth it. Let me check out this torque specs real quick. Alright, so it's 55. I've got a 12-point socket in here. You can't put these on without a 12-point socket. I was close. I said 50. And according to the service manual, it's 55. I'm going to need to get a screwdriver to jam this together, or sorry, jam the flywheel from moving while I torque these. I just want to get my torque set up here. Now the Loctite, if it's really hot out, there's a good chance your Loctite could go off before you tighten the fasteners. So you want to make sure you don't hang around too long once you put the Loctite on there. And you don't want to put so much that it gets everywhere. And like I said, these are not going into the oil galley. They're through. Before this Loctite goes off, so it's the one at 11 o'clock that I need to have a look at with the flywheel off. Gonna wipe the Loctite off right now and see what's going on with this fitment, because something just isn't right. Like there's a shoulder on these bolts, but they're just not even starting to thread for some reason. Yeah, people just think cars just snap together, like no big deal, just bolt it together, anybody can do it. Let me tell you, that is not the case. Or I guess if you don't believe me, try it. It's I assure you, they do not. There's all sorts of variables that can go wrong. Okay. Screw in. I don't know what's going on with that. It's super weird. Something must be up with the way this fits. So I've got two fasteners in now, hoping to hold it in place while I thread some fasteners in with Loctite on them. But I'm sure this is probably supposed to be really, really a tight fit. So I'm just trying to check them before I start squirting Loctite on them. Little break from that engine assembly and trans assembly flywheel debacle. Anyway, I spoke to my engine builder and he said just to put all 5 bolts in. It was that I couldn't get the 6th one in, and I wasn't sure if the crank was drilled wrong, the flange, or if the flywheel was drilled wrong. But you know, he said just use a rat tail file and just open it up just enough, because the other 5 are keyed in, and that's important. A really tight fit is really, really important in this application. So that's why I'm being a little cautious. I don't want to screw this up and have that thing come loose. So we'll get her. But I wanted to show you guys some detail. My son Richard was over here helping me on the charger, like he's doing a few days a week now, which I'm really stoked because things go a lot faster with another set of hands, and his hands are pretty talented, so I wanted to show you guys some of his work. But you get the cast coat iron for that natural look, third member, and then the the brace that I put on the back. Housing's got like 19 coats of paint on it. You see the U-bolts are not zinc anymore. We stripped them and painted them with like a ceramic engine paint. That's that cast coat iron stuff. I think it looks, that's the closest to natural I can find. So I'm not trying to go for, you know, show winning stuff here. This is not that, obviously, but I want to be as correct as reasonable, so as I've said before. But yeah, the axles are just sitting in there. I haven't chosen a rear brake setup yet. It's going to be a Willwood, I think, but it's important that I have a parking brake because this car is manual. Yeah, so yeah, it looks pretty killer under here. I mean, it's pretty awesome to see it coming together. And those shackles are restored, obviously, but the thickness of those shackles, the OEM ones, I actually ended up rehabbing the OEM ones and painting them and putting them back on because the thickness was almost double that of the aftermarket set of shackles I had. So I put those aside for an emergency and put the OEM ones on there. They're a little scaly on the pins, but I'd way rather have, and that looks like 1/4 inch to me. Yeah, so it was really bad. So kind of scary, but I need as much security here as I can get. And then of course the tank is going in very, very soon. So got some irons in the fire. And inside here, got the plugs in. Well, not all of them. POR went down nice, just as an added layer of, I guess, seamless sealing, just to prevent any water if it ever get on the floor ever again, just to prevent rust. So, but yeah, this thing has come a long way.